So when you meet someone like my next guest and you follow him on his channels, then it's really easy to actually have the feeling and become the understanding that this is super instinctive, and whatever he does is kind of like comes from within the style, the travel, the rituals, the collaborations. Whatever he does, it feels extremely effortless. It has kind of the appearance of it has always been there. It has always been part of his identity. What surprised me the most when talking to him was actually not, where he found his style necessarily or what influenced him, but the fact how reflective he was to everything he does. Despite all the polished things that you see online from him, the attractive things and the sexy things, which obviously is exciting, but actually much more how reflective he is about what's really driving him. The driving factors are mostly curiosity and experiences and interactions with people. To be honest, this was really a cool experience for me. I was curious and I had a fantastic experience with our next guest, Matt Hranek from W.N. Brown Project. This is Matt.
Let me give you a little background information. I am the oldest male child in an Italian family.
Okay.
So I've been just told I was fantastic my entire life to a fault, right? Luckily, there was enough people in my life that tempered and, made sure that I knew that I was not. Okay. But I think confidence is interesting because I think that comes out of experience. I think it comes out of the support structure of how you grew up with your family when you were making decisions or silly decisions and people encouraging the right things to do, and then you start feeling like you're doing the right thing. I think confidence is sort of this idea of like, I'm doing the right thing for me, and and then when you have successes of, I don't know if it's relationships or business, or you feel good in your clothes, or you have a good haircut, or it's like that kind of is all of the things, that all the ingredients that I think that ultimately get to this thing called confidence. Am I often thinking, have I made the right decision? Am I being insecure about this? Yeah, all the time. This is the human condition. But being rewarded, however that is, by affection or money or notoriety, that is something else that kind of builds your confidence of, am I doing the right thing, making the right decisions, wearing the right clothes?
Yes.
Surrounding myself with the right people. Like that's all those factors are very important, I think. In it's a very abstract thing, this word, right?
Yes, it is.
Because confidence can be confused with arrogance and cockiness, and people who appear confident sometimes can be terribly insecure people. I think I try to be very, very kind of open. I think emotionally, I wear my emotions on my shirt sleeves, and I think I surround myself with people who are very thoughtful critics and not just enablers.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
I think enabling people is a dangerous thing. And my wife Yolanda is incredibly supportive, but also loves to punch the hole in the idea, and I think that I think it makes you better. Critical thinking makes you better.
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect. I mean, you kind of reference now a lot of things that I'm actually really curious about. So, because confidence kind of for me is also expressed in different kind of ways, right? For example, you singing in the bar, right? Or kind of like the way you kind of presented yourself at the Jimmy Fallon the show. I mean, you seem completely really, really relaxed in that kind of situations. And then that's one of the things that I was a little bit curious about. Is it just kind of the perception of you being relaxed and confident in those situations, or do you really feel that way?
It's interesting. I'm more anxious going to the barber than I am than going on television. Like I don't have I don't have any nervousness at all. Like I have anxious energy, of course, because it's excitable. And I think that comes out of practice. You know, I was been performing my whole life. You know, I'm from this big Italian American family, and you know, being a performer was sort of how you stood out. Or you know, I was not a great athlete like my
No.
cousins were. So like, you know, I found this thing that allowed me to kind of rise above the mass of that family. Like that family thing, for example, Yolanda, we were in the green room with my wife Yolanda and my friend Steven, and they were so nervous. Yolanda was so nervous. And I was just like, I'm not nervous. I know I'm prepared. I'm a good student when it comes to that. Like I'm prepared. I know the points. I know the beats. And that gives you confidence, right? If you prepared yourself for the thing, if that's a job interview, you know, or national television, you feel like, okay, I could do this. And then, you know, I was more concerned of like, you know, was I gonna my gut stick out or my hair look weird? You know, like and
Yeah.
also like the about singing at PT, like I know those songs. I know those songs perfectly. I practice. I practice with the band. So when I'm up there, I know we're gonna hit those beats. So that is so I guess a lot of that is about being prepared. Like, are
Okay.
we, you know?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. In what aspect do you think that you, I mean, you the kind of, without going into much detail about your whole kind of photographer kind of career, do you think that that had also a part of that because you were kind of behind the camera and then watching people and how they acted and interacted
Well,
and
I think I've always and still am a voyeur. You know, I love being an observer, and photography was the ultimate kind of expression of that. I always wanted to be a photographer all my life. I went to university for photography. I moved to New York, was a photographer, and then, you know, being a good photographer for what I did was about being a good observer, and then understanding what's in the observation, which is light and color and expression and moments, you know, and that's why I think in the genre I was working, I did very well. And then, you know, digital started changing the playing field of all that. And then that's when I felt like I needed to kind of reinvent myself a little bit and pursue something different, still within the kind of world that makes my voyeurism, you know, kind of be beneficial and not just perverted or whatever. You know, it's like, you know, but
makes sense.
but that's where, you know, the involvement of the photography came about. One second.
Yeah.
Jamie, come in the barber shop. It's Matt.
You're in the
Just
barber shop.
I just saw my random friend walking down the street.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm actually above the barbershop in Rome that I go to. My friend Bob owns.
Okay.
So yeah, I was on the street and I was like, okay, Bob, I got to run upstairs and do this. You know, can I use your office slash bar
Oh,
slash.
fantastic, fantastic.
Anyway, so I still am a huge fan of photography. I still love what I do with it, and it's just a different application now.
Yes, yes. But how did, I mean, you said that you always wanted to go into photography. Was that kind of like coming out of the family, or was that a role model that
Yeah,
you
my father was a very serious amateur photographer. His main job was he was a commercial artist, and
Okay.
he was a sign painter and illustrator, and my mother was a beautician, so she had her own kind of sense of expression, you know. And I never could draw very well, so I think my father sensed that. He handed me a camera one day, and that was it. You know, it never
Well,
came out of my hand.
no, and the kind of the style that you have, I mean, that obviously that developed over time, but was your father as well a role model in that context? I remember that I think you posted a picture of him
Yeah.
some time ago where he is super stylish and elegant and wearing a suit and everything.
Yeah, I think my father had great style. I mean, he went to work every day in a very utilitarian way. You know, he was in Levi's and, you know, chukka boots and a barracuda coat, you know, but like he wore suits on the weekends, you know, like he would dress on the weekend. I mean, he didn't have to wear a suit every day and go to an office. So like his expression of dressing happened on the weekend or going to church. You know, we're a big Catholic family. Everyone dressed on Sunday. You know, both of my grandfathers were European. They had good innate style. Both of them were shoemakers. Like it was just around me where I grew up. There was a lot of Italians, so like I was going to Italian tailors, you know, to get my Levi's hemmed. You know what I mean? Like it just was
Yeah.
around me, and it was important to the men around me. So
Mhm.
it became important to me because
Yes.
I liked those guys.
How much are you aware of the fact that you have become a little bit the role model style-wise, and how much do you actually play into that?
Well, I think it's very charming and flattering when, you know, guys ask my advice or they stop me on the street or, you know, it's just, it's very humbling and sweet. I think it's great. I mean, I definitely have developed a strong point of view of what I think my own personal style is, how I perceive style, but you know it's not etched in stone. It's not like when I'm on the subway in New York and I see, you know, younger guys expressing a more urban sensibility of their style, like I would never in a million years wear that, but there's something that I really love in the observation of that, and often say to guys, you know, I just love your style, and they look at me
Mm.
like you look like some preppy geezer, like what are you talking about? So
Uh,
I think you have to. I mean, I'm definitely focused within the wheelhouse of the kind of clothes I like and that I've always liked. There, like
mm,
I've talked about this 100 times. Like my evolution of personal style has only gotten better with fabrics and cloth and tailors. The baseline for that style, which was basically a northeastern preppy, has always been the same. I've always
mm,
been in loafers my entire life. I've always been in white denim and cable knit sweater. You know, it's like it's just I just got better versions of those things
mm,
now, and
mm.
maybe too much. Like I always loved vintage
Mm.
military. I always loved tweed. And I think, you know, I kind of had some diversions in the 90s, particularly during like, you know, grunge, you know, but at least it was still flannel shirts, you know.
Okay. So you because one of the things that I actually wondered is also because of the all the things you do and you're quite present and also public and outspoken about the all the also the collaborations and everything that the has Matt Hranek become a little bit the brand as well that you have to that you feel that you have to kind of live up to almost a little bit of kind of a pressure that oh is that really kind of up to that kind of expectations, but it doesn't
Well,
sound like it, to be honest, now just listening to you.
well, I like that William Brown has established a voice and a point of
Mm,
view that people can relate to when they think about that. And that is, I think, a balance between high and low. I think it is very masculine without being like bro, if you know what I mean.
mm,
Like,
mm,
but it also has a deeply sensitive perception on life and things. And that is definitely being driven by my own selfish interest.
mm,
And I think my father was very much the same kind of character. And I like that we're finding an audience of like-mindedness. You know, I like that there's these guys out there that all kind of feel the same about that. It's nice to know that that community is out there. You know, the collaborations are often generated by, again, this selfish need or want to have that thing.
mm,
So when a brand like Sunspell comes to me and says, you know, what do you see in our kind of style ethos? You know, how do you insert yourself? Well, I'm like, I already love your polo shirts. I just wish they had a standing collar.
oh,
And what if it was long sleeve? And then, you know, and then they're like, we never really thought about that. So it came out of this selfish want that I wanted
mm,
that thing. And I would say all the collaborations kind of evolve that way. You know, I had someone recently saying to me, like, you know, the essence of these collaborations really are about this kind of marketing of a brand, you know. And also I can pretend to be an armchair designer, which is a lot of fun, you know,
mm.
working with people that understand the technical expression of this craft. I can come in and, you know, I have this master class on how to do it, and that's very exciting for me to learn all that stuff.
Mhm. You know, one of the things that I was actually thinking about that I think I feel the way kind of you do these collaborations and what you just kind of explained that is kind of really coming through. Also, the Instagram and all this kind of communication platforms that you're using. I think I feel that as well that it's a really personal thing for you as well. I mean, there's no kind of big business plan behind it or something like that.
To a fault.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, ultimately there has to be something. It feels that this has always been your life, and I almost had difficulties envisaging you as a fashion photographer, kind of on a shoot or something like that. So and I then one of the things that I have, for example, I have also kind of a vision how I want to, and I'm 50 years old, so I'm not that young anymore, but I have a vision of kind of how I want to live my life. My wife is Swedish, so I have a house in Sweden. We have an apartment here in Zurich, and then we want to have something in Italy as well because that's close to my heart, has always been, and kind of we're trying to set this up, and obviously you have the distances are a little bit bigger, but a similar
Yeah.
kind of setup. And for me, this feels so natural. Was that always the goal? Did you always have this kind of feeling of having this kind of life between the New York and south
Well,
of Bordeaux
yeah.
and Italy, or is that because it feels extremely natural?
Well, I think that I always had this idea, this kind of passion of wanderlust, and I always was in love with Italy. I was been coming here since the early '80s, when I was a student, and always felt most very connected to the European sensibility. And I remember thinking to myself, God, if I could just spend a week in Europe, and then I spent a month, and then I spent a year, and I was like, wow, this is really a dream coming true. And I love going back to New York and to my home and my farm out in upstate. And I'm deeply rooted in that American experience. But I think, I was raised by Europeans
Mm,
first.
mm,
These were first generation immigrants. My grandparents were immigrants. I really felt like I was being raised as in a very European sensibility. So that gravitation was very natural for me. And I find a lot of inspiration from being in Rome or being in the southwest of France or just traveling around. I love living out of a suitcase. I think people who complain about that are just obnoxious. It's like if you're living out of a suitcase, then you're living, I think, a very extraordinary journey of life. It's
mm,
like I do get tired, but it's fine. It's like, again, I'm not 35 anymore.
mm.
And like last week I got sick, and I looked at Elon and was like, well, how did that happen? I got mad, like, I like, how did that happen? She's like, well, you've been running around like a madman for the last 3 weeks. Like, why wouldn't it happen? And of course, like, I don't commit, and I just take care of myself, and I shake out of it, and we go to the next thing.
Mm.
But it is a very natural, organic flow that I have between these impractical pieces of real estate that we have.
For me, it wouldn't be. I don't think it's impractical, but I think it's a. I have the feeling that it serves a dedicated purpose as well, right? I
Well, I
mean,
find them very inspiring. I mean,
yes.
like to walk around ancient Rome and, realizing that what a small town Rome can be, and the people that we navigate, and the experiences that I have here, even in the most routine part of the day, I find absolutely inspiring.
Mm,
I have those moments in New York as well. It's not limited to Rome, but I try to bring all those things. I try to find inspiration. It sounds very silly, but I try to find inspiration in the most kind of
mm,
mundane part of my
mm,
my
mm,
day. And
mm,
it's like Yolanda's very focused and at the computer, and very. She's a great manager of time and stuff, and like I just go crazy, and I always say to her like, I'm just gonna run out. I won't be long.
mm.
And then like 4 hours, 4 hours later, I come home, and she just knows that that's what's going to happen.
Mm,
I'm a much better field agent. I'm much better out there exploring than,
mm.
you know,
So was the kind of you starting WM Brown the start of this kind of lifestyle, or did that start before?
I think it was very relevant when I was a photographer. You know, I think photography was the conduit for me to get places. You know, people paid for me to go places, and that was really my intent. And so I did I was on the road a lot with photography, and then, you know, trying to separate a commercial life with a more abstract life. I started the blog, the William Brown Project, and that is what the everything kind of evolved out of that, you
Yes.
know, which was on Blogspot. You know, Yolanda and I kind of losing our jobs in traditional legacy publishing really solidified that we should be doing this for ourselves. And so far it's working out.
Yeah, but it's actually quite astonishing, right? Because it's this kind of, this is actually the best time to actually commit to whatever you have want, you know, whatever you
you
want
have
to
nothing
do.
to lose. You have
No,
nothing to
exactly,
lose.
exactly. And in hindsight, it looks everything perfectly aligned, right? But at the time, at the point of time, it's probably was not kind of
Well,
so.
it's all scary, you know,
Yes.
but you know, I was a freelancer my entire life. I lost my job every single day. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and then you just develop this emotional callus to that. You're like, oh, I'm not working today. And then you're like, oh, but now I'm working for 2 weeks. And, you know, it's like, once you experience that, and once you don't identify yourself with your job,
Yes.
it's easier to move away. And you know, I had incredibly supportive, emotionally supportive people in my life, and my father was one of them. That was like, there's no reason why you can't do that. Like, I mean, he wasn't unrealistic. Like, I think it's important to understand your limitations, but I don't think it's crazy to pursue mad ideas. I think the biggest risk takers are often the most successful, because you know, you need to take risk. You need to fail. You need to fall down. You need to understand, you know, why that footing wasn't correct. Like, that is, I think, an amazing learning opportunity.
Agree.
And also, you know, listen to people and keep your
Yes.
mouth shut. Listen to, you know, like, I used to do that when I was starting out in the photo business as an assistant. I was like, man, this is like, I'm never going to learn all this stuff. Like, I mean, I'm going to, you know, just keep my mouth shut and listen and learn and observe, and, you know, and then you just get experience, right? And that is such a valuable part of finding that confidence, like, to get back to your original question.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think also feeling comfortable with uncertainty, right? That kind of like that something is not, it doesn't have to always to be 100% kind of planned all the way through. Which for a Swiss person, that is a horrible feeling, to be honest, right?
Well, I have a new friend who's quite successful in the kind of .com digital space, and she had this great line that was called "correct and continue." And I think what's so great about that is, like, yeah, we can sit around and be obsessed about why this isn't working, or the conversation could be about, how do we get it to work? Like,
Yes.
I don't want to talk. We know why it's not working. I don't want to talk about it. Let's, you know,
Yeah, exactly, exactly,
correct and continue, you
exactly.
know.
One of my previous podcasts, I interviewed Daniel Lindström. He's a fashion editor in Sweden and has
Mhm.
been doing that for 25 years. And he's kind of attending these big fashion shows from Prada and whatnot, right? And that what he then actually kind of in our discussion, what he disclosed to me was that he had, for example, I think it was a sort of high-end brand pair of trousers that he bought because he thought it's so cool. And then he actually went kind of, he dressed up, went out, and after 2 blocks, he was just like, no, this is not working, and kind of went back and changed. And then he said, he said, and it's like, I'm 52 or something years old, and this still happens to me. So the question is for you then, like, that doesn't happen to you, or does it?
Yeah, there's a few purchases, you know, like location, vacation purchases where you're like, well, of course I'm going to wear this caftan. And then you're like, no. I think, you know, when I pack, it all looks the same. You know, there's like a chambray shirt, a striped shirt, there's white denim, there's an Oxford, there's a navy blue sweater, there's a navy blue turtleneck, there's a blue jacket with the gold buttons, and slight variations of that stuff, right? Seasonally. But, you know, it's consistently falling within that perspective. Yeah, sometimes I put on clothes and I think like, oh, this is going to be cool, and I'm in Capri. Of course, I should have this knit striped shirt, you know. And then you're like, no, I'm never going to wear that again.
Are you comfortable in doing nothing?
Yeah, but my nothing is always something. I have internal criticism in the job that I do, that I don't often appear to be working hard enough. But the reality is, I think what I do and I do well, I make look very easy. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of thought, effort, and work experience behind that. You know, that was a bit of a sore point when I was working in photography, because it came very easy to me, and problem solving and came very, very easy to me. And a lot of people didn't like that. You know, they wanted it, like, they wanted it to be hard. Like, I never understood that. You know, there are people out there in the world that think things need to be difficult and hard to be successful with good return. And I think that's absolute bullshit. I mean, yes, some things are hard. Like, I am not a great student of math. That is hard for me. You know what I mean? But like, problem solving in the kind of creative space has always been easy for me. I've always been very fluid with ideas, perceptive and receptive to collaborations with people that also have good ideas. And I find that's easy. I've worked very, very hard in a style that to some may appear, like even my mom think is like, you know, are you really working? You know, is like, you know, just drinking Negronis at bars in Italy, is that really working? Well, yes, I wrote a damn book about it. You know, like,
Yeah, exactly. And that was actually almost my closing question, because I think that's I was actually thinking exactly about that as well. If you had to strip that, you know, if everything had to go, or kind of like whatever, you know, you have now, your Land Rovers, your watches, your houses, and bikes, even, right? And if everything had to go, and you could keep one thing, what would that be?
well, I want to keep my family. I'd like to have them around.
Yeah, that's a given. That's a given.
That's a given.
That's a given.
I think, listen, I think about this all the time. Like, I'd like to have the watch my father left me. That's important. I really honestly don't care about anything else. I mean, I was in Madrid one time and I saw this guy in this local bar pulling those tiny little Cagna beers, right? And he was probably a guy in his 40s. And it was all locals in there. He was just pulling beer after beer. He never stopped smiling. He never looked unhappy. And I said, Yolanda, if I lost everything today, I could do that job. And I would do that job with absolute pleasure. And I would do that job with absolute dedication and thoughtfulness. And all of this can go away because I know that I don't need that to be happy. I know I don't. I mean, it's nice having stuff, but stuff also is like the biggest burden in my life is stuff. But alleviating all of that would kind of just be, you know, yeah, I think about that a lot, and I don't think I'd have a problem with it. Even when, you know, this evolution of like losing jobs and trying to figure out what the next step was, I said again, I said to Yolanda, like, I could make coffee and serve coffee. I love that. I love it. Still would provide a lot of inspiration for me. Being around people, being thoughtful, engaging in conversation, like, that's all I really care about. This platform is about creating community and communicating with people that I think I probably have something in common with, and I probably like, you know, and that's all that's important. You know, surrounding yourself with that quality of people that you care about. You know, and that doesn't require a good car, fast car,
No,
good
exactly.
washer, you know what I mean, or decent tailoring. It doesn't require any of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, because one of the things is like, what would you not want others to know, you know, if they aspire the same lifestyle? And then the final was, what are you still figuring out?
Okay, the first thing is you got to put the work in. You got, you know, unless it's handed to you, you got to put the work in. and whatever that defines that lifestyle for you, right? If that requires money, you better start making it. If that requires, you know, living somewhere, you better start applying for the visa. Like, you got to put the work in. Nobody handed me anything. Like, I grew up in a very middle class family. There was not a lot of money around. Nobody was signing checks for me to get places. I was given opportunity, which is very special. At the end of the day, you got to do the work yourself. That's just the
Yes.
way it is. And no matter what opportunities are given to you or what connections you have, you know, that I think is very important.
What are you still trying to figure out?
I'm trying to figure out where this, I don't know, what's the end game? You know, like, I love doing this, but like, is the end game like a little whitewashed house on a Scottish coast with a house full of terriers? You know, like, is that the end game? That sounds pretty good. Or is it like, you know, some crappy little stone house on, you know, the Peloponnese of Greece, you know, or next to a fly stream in upstate New York? That's what I'm like, what is that end game? I don't know. It's a fun journey to get there. And if you notice, those end games are not like big mansions and more cars. It's really about how do we ultimately end with this kind of simplicity? And again, that's something I think a lot about. How, you know, I could live in a little Scottish house with a bunch of terriers, no problem. Maybe that's the end game. I don't know.
I think what surprised me the most with the discussion with Matt was not his clothing, his watch collections and cars and collaborations. What surprised me the most was how thoughtful he was, how reflective he was. And aesthetics is one of his kind of key things that he has gotten from his childhood. And that was one of the driving factors. What he really kind of pays attention to. So the call, the fact that he was at his barber was really reflective of that. And that a friend passed by and he kind of dropped in for a chat and then had a dinner reservation. So our discussion was cut short. And I think that's really reflective. He knows and understands what's kind of giving him energy. And that's also why he's kind of building the life he has now. But it's also important to understand that he's really reflecting about what he really needs in life and what is an add-on and a nice thing to actually have and what is really kind of core to himself. And for all of you who thought that he always had this lifestyle, I think he was moving into that direction because of a necessity. If you want a lifestyle like this, you actually have to work for it. He was working and is still working for maintaining this lifestyle. That was also really refreshing to hear. So thank you and see you in the next one.